Portland, St. Anne, St. Elizabeth, St. James, Westmoreland, St. Thomas, and Trelawney.
Minister Williams says the decision to gradually reintroduce face-to-face classes in select schools was driven by data. She notes the risk profiles of the schools being considered are low.
The data that we have tells us that there are 73 schools that have been assessed as being low risk based on the many variables. But in these 73 schools, there are 58,542 students, plus teachers, plus parents who would have to wake up and travel to school every morning. That's a lot of persons. And so to be extra cautious, we will be starting with a subset of that.
Favour Williams, Education Minister, addressing a virtual media briefing last evening. And the Health Minister says all the 620 residents and staff of the state-run Golden Age Home in Vineyard Town, St. Andrew, have been tested for COVID-19. He says 87 of those tested recorded positive results, while 553 returned negative results.
These are the final numbers after validation and consultation with the home. And we have worked very closely with Minister Mackenzie, of course, who is the Minister of Local Government and Rural Development. Of the 620 residents and staff members tested over the 3-day period, 87 results have returned positive for COVID-19, while 553 were negative. The 87 positive cases include 65 residents and 22 staff members. All the positive cases remain stable, and that's good, and asymptomatic, except for the first case, who unfortunately has since died.
He says the deceased was a 73-year-old male whose death was reflected in the last COVID-19 numbers published by the ministry. Dr. Tufton says while the health authorities have seemingly contained the spread of the coronavirus at the facility, work continues at the Golden Age Home.
A meeting was held with the management team and cleaning service provider to outline the corrective measures to be taken at the facility. Training of staff members and the service provider commenced on Monday, October 26, 2020. And the daily visit by the medical officers will continue as the health team ensures that the positive cases are isolated appropriately and that they are monitored closely. So we will continue to do work at the Golden Age Home. It's the largest such facility in the Caribbean, and there is need to ensure that the protocols are observed. But I think we're out of the woods in terms of the risk and the threat to the residents and the staff there.
The health minister says that they've also embarked on a series of inspection of private nursing facilities.
Our latest report on inspections of residential facilities revealed 236 such facilities have been inspected, including 203 nursing homes, 13 infirmaries, 14 children's homes, and 6 rehabilitation institutions. Some 99 nursing homes, or 48.8%, were found to be compliant with the COVID-19 protocols. The same obtained for 7 of the infirmaries, 4 children's homes, and 2 of the rehabilitation institutions. 2 nursing homes, 1 in Manchester and 1 in Hanover, upon inspection were ordered closed, and the others have been served notices under the nuanced regulations and given up to a maximum of 30 days to become compliant.
Dr. Christopher Tufton, Health and Wellness Minister, speaking last evening during a virtual media briefing. Meanwhile, the health minister says indications the country could be seeing a flattening of the COVID-19 infection curve should not be taken for granted. This as he notes that the country's recovery rate has inched past the infection rate.
The minister would have outlined in his graph the trends as it relates to new cases or active cases and the encouraging sign of it giving an indication of flattening out. As he said earlier, it's not an indication to be complacent. In public health, the team has been monitoring and discussing the the encouraging signs of less cases each day, with positivity rates now moving down from over 30% at its highest points to today, I think it was 14%. The day before yesterday, it was 8%. And this is all very good.
However, the health minister says there is still need for individual responsibility.
Having said that, it's an indication of the measures that we're taking, and so we certainly encourage the public to continue to abide by those measures until we get to a point where we think we are confirming the downward trend. So that's encouraging, and we want to commend the team on the ground and the public.
In the meantime, Dr. Tufton says the ministry's public health team is implementing measures to tackle the mental health challenges brought on by the pandemic. He also notes a wellness program has been crafted to assist frontline workers grappling with the ongoing stress of the crisis.
Studies that we have done, the tracking or tracing that the medical team on the ground have done is confirming that there are segments of the population that are more affected than others, but there's definitely fatigue that exists in the general population. As a result, we have launched a number of programs to try and address that fatigue. From the frontline staff perspective, we have had a wellness program, and we have given details of that, which essentially is an attempt to give frontline workers, not just healthcare workers, but frontline workers in the COVID response, an opportunity for rest and relaxation, for counseling, for priority testing, and the details of that have been made public.
Dr. Christopher Tufton, Health and Wellness Minister. Prime Minister Andrew Holness says the nationwide curfew imposed under the Disaster Risk Management Act has been extended until November 16. This despite admitting that the data shows the country's recovery rate is now at 49.5%, edging past the local infection rate. The all-island curfew imposed by the government was to end on October 31.
To further control the spike, the current measures, which were to expire on October 31st, are now being extended. The island-wide curfew will remain at 9 p.m. to 5 a.m. daily until November 16, 2020. As it relates to the provision of public transportation, the provision of public transportation by motor car being limited to one person, less than the maximum number of persons allowed to be carried under the relevant license, will remain in effect until November 16, 2020.
The ban on funeral services and other such events will continue until November 30, and the burials remain permissible with 15 persons. Prime Minister Holness also notes that there has been an extension of the special curfew measures imposed on two communities, namely Cornwall Courts in St. James and Raytown in Kingston.
Now, in addition to these island-wide measures, we have been implementing special curfew measures in certain areas that are densely populated with a potential for exponential rise in cases. These are currently in place for the Raytown community in Kingston and Cornwall Courts in St. James. And these will be in place until November 6, 2020. In these areas, persons are allowed to go to work, take public transport, carry out their essential activities of daily living, such as shopping or visiting the doctor or carrying out their small businesses.
Prime Minister Holness says residents in these communities will also face additional restrictions.
The curfew is from 6 p.m. to 5 a.m. and during the curfew hours, only essential workers with identification are allowed to enter and exit the defined curfew area. The gathering limits in these areas are much stricter. No more than 6 persons are allowed to gather in any public place. And 3, all the other existing restrictions, such as mask wearing and physical distancing, are strictly enforced.
Prime Minister Andrew Holness addressing a virtual media briefing last evening. Meanwhile, the Prime Minister says while he understands some persons are suffering COVID-19 fatigue, it's no excuse to deviate from the law.
We're seeing it being displayed in all kinds of ways. We're seeing it being displayed in a resistance to law enforcement when they are enforcing the measures. And let me just say here that that is no excuse for disobeying the law, for disrespecting our law enforcement officers. And there will be no let up by the security forces because someone may claim that they are just fatigued and tired of the situation. There is no excuse. And in fact, what we have said to the security forces is that they must maintain the orders under the Disaster Risk Management Act and increase their enforcement.
Prime Minister Andrew Holness, he was speaking during a virtual media briefing. And in international news this morning, two of Europe's biggest economies are reinstating some form of national lockdown as the continent confronts a surge in coronavirus cases and deaths. From Friday, people in France will only be allowed to leave home for essential work or medical reasons. President Emmanuel Macron said the country risks being overwhelmed by a second wave that no doubt will be harder than the first. Germany, meanwhile, is imposing a less severe national lockdown. Chancellor Angela Merkel said the measures coming into force on Monday are not as far-reaching as in France, but they include the closure of restaurants, bars, gyms, and theatres. And that's it for the news at 7. I'm Tawna Thomas.